Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. Please excuse me. I'm losing my voice. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but that raspiness is not me just being sexy. It is.
Lean into it. You got that radio voice.
I got the radio voice.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I think it's actually sinuses and allergies that are having their impact with all of the phlegm and stuff that is going on. Jonathan, are you struggling with allergies
gross.
at all?
No.
Did you say it's gross?
I said that's gross. Yeah.
Imagine saying it and hearing it. Imagine having to deal with it and all the nasty stuff that comes out. You don't deal with allergies, or yes?
I do sometimes, but I think it might be the smoke, the wildfire smoke.
Are we suffering from that?
Yeah,
again?
We've got like air quality alerts and stuff going.
Oh my gosh, I
So
don't
it
know
might be
what's
bad.
going. So there's that. There is 8.8 earthquake. What is going on in the world?
I didn't hear about this. I heard something about an earthquake, but I didn't hear what
flash
the story was.
floods. All of these things are taking place. This is the world in which we live. So I want to thank you guys that are tuning in. I see you guys populating on our social media streams. We want you to like, tag, and share this conversation with those in your social community. I also want to give a shout out to everybody who listens to us via WSGW 100.5 FM and 790 AM simulcast. We certainly want to thank you right here in the great city of Saginaw in the Great Lakes Bay region. We want to thank you guys for coming in. I'm seeing you all come in right now. Thank you for all that you're doing. Today we're going to talk. I titled this, which is kind of misleading if you've been reading through this, Jonathan. I titled it the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And the reason I did that is because that's really the thing that was on my mind. Looking at some things that we're going to talk about today, a number of the things that have been taking place over the past, it is already the 8th month of the year, over the past 8 months, and thinking about what we are dealing with and what's to be ahead. I just have really been thinking about the fact that the Civil Rights Act of 1964, to me, I think it is where we are headed. And we'll have some conversation about that as we move forward. But when I began to think about all of the things that are going on, one of the things that came to mind is the fact that we are now, I was listening to someone on a podcast, Jonathan, and he was a far right MAGA extremist, in his terms, not mine. And he was talking about how they were going to take their country back. And many of you, if you've heard this rhetoric, this kind of talk, this conversation taking place, more prevalent than I've ever heard it in a very long time. But I think it starts with making America great again. And now there are these conversations of taking America back. They're taking their country back. And I guess at first glance, my thought was, okay, they're talking about they're going to kick, all of the immigrants out or whatever, people that are here illegally. And so I continued to listen, and as they continued, it wasn't a podcast; it was a reel actually. As they continued to have the conversation, they began to talk about all of the things that ail our country. They began to address the fact that white men have had to take a back seat, but they're coming back. We're resurging. They were talking about how blacks and minorities have taken their jobs. They've talked about how they've destroyed the country by bringing in, all of this violence and crime. And I was really kind of like, wow. Normally I wouldn't, but today I had time. So I listened into the conversation. And as they continued to go, they began to talk about all of the ills in American society, with all of those attributing to the fact that white men were being put in positions that they could no longer lead. Because we have become soft in trying to make everything equal for everyone. So my initial thought about that, Jonathan, I was like, wow, that is a very bland perspective of America.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But have you been hearing these kind of trolling comments, these conversations taking place?
I've heard that in like rage bait, like just trying to get interaction through making people angry before, but
they got me today. Normally, I would just continue to click. They got me today.
Yeah, I haven't really heard it from anybody semi-legitimate.
Yeah, so I've been hearing, not necessarily that way, But what it got me to thinking was this, Jonathan. And as we talk today, this is the reason I said I wanted to eventually talk about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, is because I see a lot of the things that we're dealing with, a lot of the things that are going on, seem to be, to me, are aiming or pointing or targeting that particular act. When we look at what has taken place at the beginning, at the very start of this administration, we've had a lot of conversations on here about, what is it really targeting Black people? Mark, our dear co-host, who is probably somewhere in the sun doing what rich white men do when they get on the beach and enjoy their wonderful lives.
These rich white men forced to take a back seat, surfing on the beach,
bodyboarding, me and Jonathan have to live these regular lives. Jonathan, woe is us, right? But shout out to Mark. I absolutely love Mark. But we're having these conversations, and it was continually a conversation, I believe, that, and I would agree to in many instances that it wasn't necessarily a lot of the things were targeted, I believe, directly toward Black, but he had also injected the fact that this is really about rich or poor, and that there were a lot of things that I also jumped in, and I would agree that a lot of what has taken place, it is the rich elite versus the working poor, or just the poor in general. And so as we continue to go, and we saw first an attack on DEI, and the dismantling of DEI, and then the sanitation of words that you might find in anything that is related to equity or inclusivity. We saw those words sanitize, underprivileged, high risk, all of those words that were sanitized from federal grants and different entities that existed. Then we saw and are still seeing, I don't know if you're familiar with or if you've heard about what is going on now with Duke University, very much in step and toe with what has happened with Harvard. Some of your practices or whatever are inclusive, I guess would be the term. I don't know how you would term it. Some of your practices are inclusive, therefore they hinder. And I heard a word, Jonathan, that I've never heard white America use, and it tickled me. Our systemic racism. And it was interesting to me because in all of my time of having that conversation and hearing folks of color talk about systemic racism, we were always told that it was not, what is systemic racism? It didn't exist. And so to hear someone say from the Trump administration that Duke University had been operating in places of where systemic racism has existed, was quite interesting. What do you think about that? Because we've talked about it here before, systemic racism.
So I think kind of the distinction to be made is when communities of color talk about systemic racism, they're talking about an overall structure, and it's not as blatant in terms of like, well, this is the thing. Whereas when someone from the Trump administration comes out and says and can point to a policy that is directly making decisions based on race, they call that systemic racism, which I don't know if it's systemic necessarily. I think both are kind of misuses of the phrase.
Okay. When you think of the phrase, what comes to mind? What picture or what is your understanding of systemic racism?
Systemic racism in my mind, for it to qualify, would need those blatant, like, not necessarily blatant in terms of these people can vote, these people can in code, but it kind of a more reference in the specific laws and systems put in place that target race as an issue. And it would need to be pervasive. It would need to be all over the place. When people of color talk about systemic racism, it generally has to do with finding trends that negatively affect people of color and compiling them. And yeah, there's a pretty good argument to be made that all of this stuff piles up to systemic racism, but each of them are kind of issues on their own. And it's not a concerted, packaged system. You know what I mean?
It's a different understanding I would give. I'll tell you what my understanding is, and then we will find a road to each other in there. When I think about systemic racism, I think systems. I think systemic racism. And I think it is a movement away from blatant. You use a term that would be blatant. I think it's a movement away from things that are blatant. And if we look at the time when these things are pointed out, it's during a time, this is, post that short period of time when we were restructuring our nation and slavery was no longer an issue. It was after the Jim Crow era in the South. And after the Klan and all of those things, which were, I would say, very overt and very blatant. And so it moved from these blatant movements of racism where I don't like you, stay out my neighborhood, we don't want your kind around here, to being where, okay, no, everyone gets an opportunity, but the devil is in the details. I always say, especially on today, in this time that we live in, that the racism is always going to be found in the policy in this current day. So I think it is more a nuanced approach of how can we create a separatism or a separation that cannot be blatant, because I think blatant disrespect or blatant policy or blatant issues would be called to the carpet immediately because of things such as the Civil Rights Act, which did away with segregation and demeaning or choosing away from people based upon their race. So when I think of systemic racism, I think about how policies are created and how systems are set up in a very nuanced approach that allows a person to still omit or overlook or sideline an individual in a very legal way, if that makes sense. And so I look at it as a use of policy. And that's why most of what we have seen from the in the 60s with the Civil Rights Act and all of the legislation and all those things have all been about targeting policies which were really hard for Blacks to overcome. You can invite me to the dance. You can allow me to sway to the music. But if I come in with black patent leather shoes and, then I can't dance, that kind of thing. So you can come in as long as you aren't doing certain things. And so when I think of systemic racism, I think about how we use policy and how we set up entities to be able to create a narrative that is not overt, but it is very under the radar in terms of how it operates. What do you think about that definition?
I understand it.
Okay.
Like I know that's kind of the position.
Right. Okay.
I don't agree with it necessarily.
Okay.
But yeah.
What is it? What is the thing that you disagree with when we have that conversation?
You assume that racism, for that to be true, racism must exist within the system. Like the people implementing the system have to be intentionally racist about it.
Okay.
It has to be part of the well, we're racist, so we're going to put these things in place.
Okay.
And I don't think that's the case. I think at one point that absolutely was the case.
Okay.
I don't think that's the case anymore. Now, there's possibilities that in some remnants of policy that was put in place, it remains because it was the underlying assumption. But I think a lot of that has been dismantled. And I think the wrong way to go about it is building up new policy with, I think we flipped the lever too far the other way. Okay, we are explicitly being, the word being used is inclusive, but it actually means preferential.
How does inclusive mean preferential? That's confusing to me because to me they're very different words. But in your understanding, how does inclusive mean preferential?
When weight is given to race in consideration of issues.
Okay, so when race is given to race
so race factors into whether you get hired. Race factors into whether you get into college.
Why would those issues ever present themselves in your opinion? Why would those things ever be? Why would they even be necessary, or why would they be included in the first place? Why would race to be a factor to be included in, say, to the police department?
Yep.
And so we're looking. We're going to be equitable in how we inclusive in how we employ, but because for decades, the police officers were actually a system that was created to oversee those slaves that had been freed from plantations, and now they instituted policing. And so, by nature of their very initial existence, in terms of how they were utilized at that time, let me say that because it existed, but how they were utilized would let me understand that there could be no blacks that were police officers if police officers were assigned to look for slaves who were once on plantations.
Policing, if you're talking to me about this issue,
I'm just talking about how
Yeah.
when we talk about bringing equality or equity to a particular situation and how it can be used systematically is what I'm saying. So I'm using an institution like that because that is a very cut and dry institution.
So it's causing, to make up for past discrimination, it is implementing current discrimination.
Or is it implementing current? Do we see equality? I mean, based upon what you're saying, anything that is equal opportunity is problematic to those who are a part of a system that have benefited from that system.
Equal opportunity is fine as long as it is truly equal opportunity. When you see people of Asian descent losing spots in colleges because they need to bring their averages up based on race, that's a problem.
Okay, but explain. Wait a minute. Say what you said again. I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying.
So there are high achieving people,
absolutely,
mostly of like when you look at demographics,
there's mostly of Asian descent.
Yeah,
there are highly achieving black folks and white people in this nation as well.
I'm talking about the people who this is affecting.
Okay, go ahead.
Especially
not black people, but Asians.
In the late 2010s,
okay,
is when I was really paying attention to this closely. But there were people getting basically soft rejected from college because they needed to keep quotas differently, and it was not based on scores, and it was partially, at least, like there was preference given based on race.
Where do those numbers and that data come from? I mean, because if we were to look at this and we were to really have a real meaningful conversation, and I want to go back to what I talked about the officers in a minute, because I think it drives home a particular thought that I'm thinking. But when we look at this, you have to understand that blacks went from having their language, their culture, their identity, their ability to communicate, all of those things stripped from them. They came in and then created enterprises, textiles probably being even, cotton was one. But we talk about textiles, we talk about free labor, we talk about the fact that, we go to DC, everyone makes that trip to DC at least once or twice, and they see all of those beautiful monuments that are out there on the concourse. When we see those things, that was all created by black labor, free black labor. I shouldn't say free black labor. Slaves weren't paid, but the slaves' owners were paid in order to make those things take place. And then the very institutions that these African American descendants of slaves built and created and made great, they were not allowed to be educated in those very same systems. As a matter of fact, you were actually imprisoned if you taught them to read or if they were found reading books. So when we look at how do we correct, what would be your thought on how we correct an injustice where people were stripped from their language, their culture, their family, their very existence, their identity? We often say that if you have an identity crisis, you can never really be who you were destined to be, because if you don't know who you are, it's essential to you being a successful individual. Having all those things stripped, how do we then institute a place where these descendants of slaves would be able to be educated and given a fair shot in a system that is 100% white? And remember, the Constitution was written in 1776. This act, the Civil Rights Act was of 1964. So everything that existed in terms of how this nation, the laws and everything about it were created, unless it's we, the people, are understood to be every individual, everything that was considered from a racist perspective that did not see blacks as a whole human. So how do we correct those issues if it's not by opening up opportunities for us to say, listen, we got to open the field, and these are bright young people. They meet the standard, they meet the qualifications. We need to let them in to correct some of the damage that we've done historically in those areas. How do we correct that? What would you say do?
Many of those systems have been dismantled and were dismantled. Much of that work done by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I'm going to sound like Mark here.
Okay.
It's not something that you can really force. It's something that needs to happen over time. When you say correct it, there is no correcting it. There is no undoing it. It happened.
I agree with you. I think that there is no undoing it. I think that as long as we exist, there's always that deficit that will exist. If I keep your people away from a book for 400 years, how do you correct that? You don't. But the resiliency that I see in Black folks, that's why I love the folks to call me Black, because I really am a Black person. And when I think about what has been able to be achieved with the issues and laws and the systems that exist, the things that we've been able to achieve have been absolutely amazing. I don't know anyone else on the planet that would have been able to make that kind of a transition. But I do note, and I take into account that there is a fear that exists of, are we kind of going too far? I guess would be the question that many people have. I want to have that conversation when we talk about the Civil Rights Act, when we talk about equity, when we talk about being an inclusive nation, because if we're not an inclusive nation, then that means we're exclusive, which means that only certain people have a right to the American dream. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation, laying the framework for a conversation. What's happening? Is the 1964 Act on civil rights under attack? Stick, stay, don't go away. We'll be back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Gray. We've been talking about really just kind of delving into where we are. I'm all in my feelings about everything that's going on and some things that I've seen. And so we're talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I do want to take into account. We talked before, and as we were talking, I was saying that that today the racism it's always in the policy. It's in the policy. And so when we talk about systemic racism, which I was surprised, those of you who are just tuning in, I heard a person from the Trump administration use the term systemic racism as it related to Duke and their admissions process. Yeah. And so I thought it was interesting because I didn't think the term ever existed, or it was a non-factor before hearing that. So it was very interesting. But one of our social media folks bring up a very important point. And this is how I always say that that the racism is no longer white sheets and pointed hats and all of those things, burning crosses, but it's in the policies that exist. When we look at what's taking place right now in Texas, what would always happen in our nation is that whenever an issue would come up, we understood that Southern states were, hey, we want to keep slavery intact. That's what the Civil War was about. Free labor, slavery. And we saw that it would always go through the legal systems, the governmental systems, the justice system. And what would always happen is that the Supreme Court would make a ruling that would overturn things, and it would set the advancements that African Americans would make back decades. We've seen similar things take place with this current administration. We now see another situation happening in Texas with the gerrymandering of seats. Have you had an opportunity to look into any of that?
I know about gerrymandering. I don't know about the current thing.
Okay, so they are currently the Republicans that are in office are currently trying to redistrict, and that would create in this redistricting, which is already unfavorable toward the Democratic Party, or I should say minorities in that particular case, because it's based upon those own areas. And so now they're trying to redistrict again. And with doing so, they're trying to take out 5 additional seats that would become Republican districts. And the purpose of this, once again, and this is how we use the system of laws that exist for us to be able to make changes in policy that are not favorable, even though they may read legal, they may read inclusive, but we use those policies and those systems to change how things and the outcomes of our government go. And so when we look at those kind of things, we look at it, and I always say that the devil is in the details. We hear that all the time. And so when I look at what's taking place, I look at those types of things. Why would we want to change the power of someone's voice or their vote? It's to take away their power. When we look at what's taking place with all of the universities across the nation that are being hushed, not able to talk about equity, I don't see why equity has ever been a bad thing. I think that if you are a person who has a personal physical challenge, you should not just be given the job, but you should be giving those tools that allow you to do your job, so that you have a station that is able to be, what's the term that they use when you have an ergonomically correct that allows you to be able to use the job that you've been able to apply for. So when I look at those things, equity, inclusivity are such a vital place to bring forth equality. We talk about equality, but equality without equity is not equality. And so when I look at what we're taking place, all of these things that are kind of undoing the laws, when I look at what's taking place with the issues of environmental justice, when I look at what's taking place, when I look at the issues surrounding what we call an American now, and really the 14th Amendment that made all individuals born in the United States a U.S. citizen. It says nothing about whether their parents were citizens or their grandparents were citizens. We see those nuanced approaches that have a targeted approach on exactly who it is that we're talking about. And so those kinds of conversations, they're not just we want to be even or fair, because they're not taking into folks that are from Europe. They're not taking into account folks that are coming from Ireland, folks who are coming from anywhere else but the countries of Haiti and Guatemala and Mexico. And so do you understand what I'm talking about when I say that we use policy to inject a racism legally? Does that make sense to you?
The immigration policy, I understand the appeal to racism there. Like, I understand where that comes from. I don't think it's a fair appeal. I don't think that's a fair place to come from, because we're not experiencing mass immigration from European countries, mass illegal immigration.
We have a president whose family and his in-laws are all hold the same cars that people who came over from, but they got theirs immediately, not through the same process. I think that if there's going to be a process, everyone should abide by that process.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, what were you jumped around this agenda?
No. Absolutely. But you were saying, as we were talking about the policy being the place,
the policy being kind of abused in that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm kind of stuck on the gerrymandering thing, and I think it goes kind of, my point to that goes to a lot of these issues, in that the very basic documents that set up our country, I'm not saying things that were built on top of that,
right,
were set up in such a way so as not to, the system wasn't supposed to have like party politics and cronyism in it. And that's what's shown up.
Right.
And I think that's kind of led to a lot of what we're seeing, because that allows consolidation of power in various ways. You see, it's no longer a populace, like you look at a state senate. If let's talk about the gerrymandering.
Yeah.
You look at a state house, a state senate.
Texas.
It's not 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different interests being represented, and all of them have to bicker and argue and compromise. It's 2.
Yeah.
And so
I think it's the worst thing.
When one has the majority, they get to do whatever they want. and they get to implement things and they get to secure things that are more in their power. And it consolidates power so that when the switch flips the other way,
Have we ever seen this before, though? Have we? I
oh,
mean,
it's been happening.
when you say that the other party gets to do whatever they want, there is always a checks and balance system that has always
They're
existed.
supposed to be.
Do you see that in operation now?
I see collaboration between the different systems that were supposed to keep each other in check. They're working together. You see that with
Together for what purpose? What would be the thing?
Well, look at it in partisanship in the Supreme Court.
Well, my question would be this: what would be the thing at this state of American history, this state in this time in America, that we would see branches that were supposed to be checks and balance were collaborative? What would be the reason for something like that?
Money. that's really what it is private interests being able to funnel money into government interests through PACs, through private donations, through stock trading and things like that. Basically bribery. And so
but all of these things that are going on that we see taking place are all operating in a system that the thing that has been, it's been issues of civil rights, it's been issues of abortion. That's one of the issues. That was the thing. Remember those white evangelical, I shouldn't even say white evangelicals, because we talk about evangelicals, we're talking mostly about white America. Their thing was, the issue was abortion. But I think that the issues that I see now taking place and the conversations that are taking place are really centered around an old argument that is giving a new life. And it's the idea, it is paying America in the, how shall I say it? America paying out its citizens, a certain portion of its citizens, through the benefit of whiteness. And what I mean by that is this: we're selling whiteness as a high commodity or stock commodity, that if they weren't here, then this would benefit you. Otherizing people and saying that, hey, this is how this election was won. They're coming to take your jobs. They want to take your place. They don't want you to, they want to take your kids' education. They want to, take away, you're paying all of these things, and they want you to be on, they're going to be on their systems. They want you to take care of them. They want you to feed them. They're lazy. And so what are we going to do about it? And so I think, and this is why I say that I see the Civil Rights Act under attack, because they spoke once again to a frailty of what I think white America has, thinking that even though I'm a poor white man and I'm making these decisions that don't benefit me, I can be white. And there's a privilege or a power that comes with being white. And it's about embracing where I've come from, and embracing a power that really doesn't exist. Because at the end of the day, we see that these are rich white men, and their whole thing is power and economics. We said that earlier.
I think that mentality exists.
Absolutely.
I don't think it's the majority.
I didn't think so either, but I've never seen a Congress lie down and not bemoan any of the issues that are taking place, but to give up their presence, their power, their authority. I've never seen a strong alliance, an allegiance with a government to make sure that law enforcement officers don't have any checks and balances on how they treat the individuals that they encounter. And I have to say that again, with Blacks making up 13-14% of the population, there is a resurgence to make sure that there is no oversight in law enforcement, which reminds me, and this is going to,
How so?
Well, because a lot of the things where they're trying to, the ideas of immunity resurging, the idea of not having to pay for or have to take accountability for the actions that are taking place when you do things that are not consistent with protecting and serving. The idea that and things that we have been seeing, that you can pull Black men out of cars and abuse them and it not be considered illegal. Those are problematic because they remind me of a time right after Reconstruction, after the Jim Crow South laws, when that was exactly what their responsibility was. And so to see our Congress our judicial system and our executive branch work cohesively to bring about those types of changes, to begin to challenge what is the identity of a real American, are problematic for me. And if you have never experienced the fear or have ingrained in your DNA through what is it called? Epidemiology, or I can't think of what the word is right now, about how trauma is put into your body, and your body remembers trauma. Muscles have memory. It is a very dangerous time. The word will come to me. And so when I look at these things, and I wanted to bring up a viral moment that took place in Jacksonville, Florida. As we're talking about law enforcement, as we talk about how the laws are taking place, as we talk about branches of government working cohesively together to allow the president to have more power than he's ever had before, removing agencies. And so when we talk about equity agencies leaving the federal government, we're talking about a place where largely a lot of African Americans found refuge to work because they could not get state jobs because of the racist laws that existed on the state level, which is why the federal government came in to put these fail safes for us to have the ability to oversee and to protect those same rights, not only just a federal law, but that we implement those at a state and a local level. So this viral moment that took place with McNeil, what was McNeil's first name? William McNeil Jr. Down in Florida. I saw the video. I watched the video a million times, literally burning the video up. The police pull him over. We see the video it's captured by McNeil's personal video camera. They come to the door. They say they pulled him over. He asks, why was he being pulled over? And they tell him, after some conversation back and forth, he tells them, my window doesn't go down on the driver's side. So he's talking through them with the roll down window in the passenger side. And, they're saying that they pulled him over because his lights weren't on. And he said, I didn't know that was a policy, that my lights need to be on. It's not inclement weather. It's not raining. It's bright outside. Like, why do my lights have to be on? But this is another example of how people say, why don't you just do what you're supposed to do when a law enforcement officer pulls you over? And I think that it's important that that's not the place to fight an argument. But I think it's important to understand that African Americans are 14% of this population, 14% of the national population. But we have a rate of encounters with officers 10 times that of any other race, of white Americans. And so I think that's very problematic as to why these things are happening. So in this, we talk about these civil rights and why the Civil Rights Act and these things, these protections are so important. They punch him in the face. They break his window. They punch him in the face. They drag him out the car. He's standing there having this, going back like, what are you doing? I'm not arresting. Stop arresting. Stop arresting. He's obviously not arresting. Then they punch him in the face again and take him down to the ground. When it came to the law enforcement agency and the chief of police, who happens to be a black man, brother, you need to get together. He said that there was nothing illegal about what took place. When we give law enforcement that type of power, and I'm not a person who's anti-law enforcement, that's not where I come from. I come from a long line of folk who were police officers, lifelong careers in the military. So I respect authority. I respect officers and what they do, the hard work that they do. And I appreciate that. And I work in tandem with them. But I do think that when we begin to see questions about civil rights, we begin to see issues take place where officers can act in this way. When we begin to ask the question, are you really an American citizen, and what defines an American citizen? It puts me in the context or the thought process that where we're going, this is only a few months in, where we're going under this administration is to 1964, the Civil Rights Act, because so many pieces of what have been the entailments or the continued growth of the Civil Rights Act, when we talk about in an equitable workforce, are already been under attack and have been removed. So the only thing that's left is 1964. Do you understand, at least follow my philosophy in terms of how I'm talking, my conversation right now?
Oh, yeah. You see pieces being taken down that were put up purportedly to protect Black people and uplift Black people in certain ways. And you see those being taken down, and you wonder if 1964 is next.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so back to the Texas thing, and I want to thank those who are in our social media stream that are sharing their comments and their thoughts. When we look at that, the only thing that we can come up with, the reason for this new redistricting to give more power in the state of Texas, is because if we take away their vote or we minimize their vote, then we take away their power, their ability to fight back in a legal system, to fight back against what we see taking place on a larger scale. This has been a system or a tactic that has happened for decades. It's always happened. We're going to redistrict. We're going to gerrymander. We're going to change things. One thing that I will say is that I don't think that either Democratic or the Republican parties are the parties, the way that they're currently are set up to really be the benefit to African Americans.
To anyone.
I don't see that at all. But I do understand in the current system to which we operate, in which we're under, that if there is going to be any hope of a solution, that there is one party currently that tends to at least fight for some of the things that may be, I say, giving peanuts to a group of people. But right now, when you're fighting for everything that you got, even those peanuts mean something. They mean that you eat for another day, even though it may not be something delectable. So as we begin to have the ending of this conversation, it's important for us to understand that if you lose your vote, you lose your voice. It's important to understand that if we have a Congress that lays down and gives away full authority to a president, we no longer have a president, we have a dictator. If we have courts that set up a system that they rubber stamp and agree with whatever agenda our president has, there is no oversight or checks or balance that now exists in a nation. Your eye went up. What were you thinking?
We do not have a dictatorship.
Not yet.
We do have a Congress that lays down for Trump.
So what is that? Where does that lead us to?
That doesn't mean we have a dictatorship, because
a president, a king.
We have a president, and we have a bunch of spineless cowards in Congress.
But do you understand the danger that exists? And
we still have the vote.
What's that?
We still have the vote.
What vote?
We can vote them out.
And when do we do that? See, this is what I'm saying. This is the danger that we're seeing taking place with this concept of redistricting, this gerrymandering, because you lose the vote. So if you lose the vote, you lose that power. And then we head down the road towards dictatorship.
There are stronger cases to be made that we're heading towards a dictatorship.
Oh, no,
that's not it.
I would say that that's one of them. I think that there are stronger cases to be made. But I also have to look at, when we look at the folks who are being pardoned by some of the things that are taking place, those things are very problematic for me.
The same thing happens both ways, though.
I've never seen anyone I've never seen the January 6ers before in our current politics, our political scene. I've never seen folks actually try to overthrow our government, be pardoned by the person who's supposed to protect our nation at its highest level, who's our commander-in-chief. I've never seen that before. And so if you have an example where you've seen that before, I'm willing to listen to it, but I don't think that it exists. And so when we can see that law and order, the president of law and order, only looks for law and order when it benefits him, it's problematic. When I see what we're seeing now, it concerns me as an African-American descendant of slave, that if they're going after who is an American, what does citizenship mean, and they're looking and targeting really Black and brown countries for that particular targeted audience, then I have to begin to ask myself the question, what's next? And when I begin to look at it, I look at that we're going to take away the ability for folks to fight and to cry out about being discriminated based upon the color of their skin. This is Kareem Bowen. This is United Shades of Gray. Jonathan is over there in the corner like, Kareem, I need to be able to talk through this. We'll continue this conversation in the future. Take care of yourselves and each other. God bless you. Grace and peace.